Welcome, welcome. I am Dee Maitland with the League of Women Voters, and I'm moderator of Greater Tucson, and I'm moderator for today's forum. The League is a nonpartisan organization that neither supports nor opposes any particular political party or candidate. We present this candidate forum as a service to the community. One aside, after watching another debate this week, I had some trepidations, as you may understand. So I know the candidates understand in the audience my request to please be civil and not interrupt each other. And for the audience, please submit questions that both candidates can answer. Thank you. Let's go on. The candidates will be taking questions from the Zoom audience. Audience, you can submit your questions anytime during the forum. To ask a question, move your cursor down to the bottom of the page to bring up the Zoom menus and select the Q\A question and answer icon. Click on the icon. When the QA panel opens, type your question directly into the box. League members will be collecting the questions and communicating them to me, and I will ask the candidates on your behalf. First, let's do some background. The Pima County Sheriff's Department was established way back in 1865 and provides law enforcement services to the 7th largest county in the nation. That's us. It encompasses 9,189 square miles. The sheriff oversees approximately 1,460 employees, both deputies and civilians, plus hundreds of sheriff's auxiliary volunteers. The sheriff's department controls almost $106 million of the county budget. Besides dealing with violent and property crimes, traffic regulation and accidents, and maintaining the county jail, the department provides community outreach with such services as child safety seats, personal defense classes, fingerprint services, Disposamed and neighborhood watch programs. They cooperate with many agencies, including the city and town police departments, schools, and multiple federal and state agents. It's a big job. And now let's meet the two candidates for that job. First is Mark Napier. He is the Republican and the current sheriff. Next is Chris Nanos, a Democrat, and he has been sheriff in the past. This is how this portion of the forum will go. Candidates, you will have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. Then I will ask you several questions, most coming from the audience. Each of you will have 1.5 minutes, 90 seconds to answer. Our timekeeper will hold up signs for you first at the 1 minute mark, then at the 30-second mark, and finally stop so that you can pace your answer. The questions will be asked on a rotating basis, and after the questions, you will each have 1 minute for a closing statement. So let's begin. Candidate Nanos, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. Whoops, where's candidate Nanos?
I'm unmuting.
Okay.
Am I there now? I'm sorry, I had to get to the unmute button. Well, thank you for having me. This is really quite an honor, and I know for Mark and I both, we've been doing this for quite some time now, so we're almost at the end, and it's really important that everybody gets to hear both sides of this. My name is Chris Nanos, and I'm running for sheriff of Pima County. In light of what's happening in our nation today, I don't have to tell you just how important this election is. The office of sheriff is complex and requires not just the working knowledge of a street cop, but the knowledge that is only gained through experience. It requires someone who knows and understands how the county budget operates, someone who knows and understands the inner workings of a jail, how that functions. But it's also someone who is not only involved with the community, but it's engaged with the community institutions and its community leaders. I have over 41 years of law enforcement experience, where I started at the ground floor as a corrections officer and worked my way all the way through the ranks to the top as your sheriff. During my tenure, I worked as a street cop for over 10 years and served as a detective working in homicide, sex crimes, and child abuse, narcotics, internal affairs. More importantly, I accrued over 20 years in executive command positions. As your sheriff, I work closely with various neighborhood groups, our schools, our churches, our nonprofits. I spent a great deal of time working with other law enforcement leaders, state legislators, and community leaders to get things done. With my years of experience and knowledge at Pima County, I am committed to providing the most professional and compassionate law enforcement possible. I believe in justice with sensitivity to social ills that often need a remedy that policing just doesn't have, can't provide. I will work with community partners to address crime seriously, but also to share resources so that experts in those areas can help those in need. I
Thank,
believe in the people of the Sheriff's Department, and I think they deserve respect and support from their sheriff, and I'm committed to providing just that kind of leadership.
thank you,
Thank you.
Canada's Nanos. Sheriff Napier, it's your turn. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm Mark Napier. I'm the current sheriff of Pima County. I'd like to thank the league for putting this event on. Over the last 4 years, I've been very proud to serve you as your sheriff. We have made amazing strides at the Sheriff's Department, and I'm really excited about the direction of our Sheriff's Department. Crime is down in Pima County, which is part of a national trend, but I'm very proud of the hard work that's gone into that. Our staffing levels are stable and consistent with other agencies of our size. We now have a strategic plan and a racial profiling policy to better guide the activities of our department and the way that we interact with the community. We are engaging in meaningful law enforcement reform. Our ACT reform plan is gaining national attention as being on the cutting edge of law enforcement reform efforts in our nation. Our detention center has recently obtained the highest level of national accreditation. We are engaged more so with the community than we ever have been. We are finally holding ourselves accountable for real fiscal management with budget surpluses over the last 3 fiscal years. We've obtained grant funding to hire 10 additional deputies and to start a new rural district to serve areas of our county that have been traditionally underserved by the department. Those areas would include Sassabee, Arivaca, and the 3 Points area. We've launched innovative programs such as our therapy dog program, which we've implemented both in our detention center and as part of our SRO program. We've effectively addressed the COVID pandemic, which is a significant challenge for law enforcement. We developed a strategic approach to this, and it has kept both our staff and our inmates safe. We have had no inmate-to-inmate transmission of COVID-19 in our facility, which is really remarkable. By any objective measure, we are moving in the right direction, and the department is moving forward. I've been in law enforcement since 1981. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in social psychology and a master's degree in criminal justice. I have the education and experience necessary to professionally and effectively lead our Sheriff's Department. There's more work to be done, and I'd be honored to serve you for another 4 years as your sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Now we'll get on to the question part of it. And I thought I'd talk with the toughest question first that I know you've been receiving in your other ones. And the question is, and you each have 1.5 minutes to answer, and we'll begin with you, Sheriff Napier, is what experience can you point to that informed your opinion of Stone Garden funds?
Well, thank you. It's my experience of being in this valley in law enforcement in one form or another for the last 33 years. We have to keep in mind that the Board of Supervisors approved Stone Garden funding for 12 years, 10 years before I even became sheriff. It was often on the consent agenda. So the Board of Supervisors and 2 prior sheriffs recognized that there was an underlying public safety need for Stone Garden funding. That's why it was accepted. We do need those resources because while we do not adopt the Border Patrol's responsibility for federal immigration enforcement, and we never will, we do have transnational crime threats in the form of drug and human trafficking that are coming up from the border that we need additional resources to combat. And Operation Stone Garden funding allowed me to deploy deputies in those areas which are traditionally underserved, but are nonetheless conduits for transnational crime. We also obtained about $6 million in equipment through that grant program over the prior 12 years. So this has been a program that has been approved and solicited by 2 prior sheriffs. And when I became sheriff, I simply picked up the mantle of that and run forward because I do believe there's a public safety nexus to obtaining those fundings. Thank you.
Candidate Nanos, it's your turn to answer the question. What experience led you to being for or against the Stone Garden funds? Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. Well, my experience with Stone Garden was quite simple. When I first became sheriff, I looked at all of our programs we were involved in, and it quickly appeared to me that Stone Garden was not a fiscally sound or fiscally responsible position to be in. We were paying out more than they were giving. The Stone Garden grant is $1.4 million. It makes up less than 1% of the sheriff's budget. It's interesting to me that that's for 4 years. That's all he's talked about. Why is that? Going to the border to get a photo op with the president solves nothing. Telling one side of the political spectrum how you told Trump to shut the heck up about the wall and then denying ever saying such a thing is just flip-flopping. My issue is simply this. The federal government for years has done nothing with the border except politicize it. They've made it into a political football, and our current sheriff has decided to get into that game, and that's unfortunate. We don't need the monies. Mr. Huckleberry came out with a report just this summer that said, for every dollar we spend on Stone Garden, we spend $5 out of the county general fund. It's not beneficial for us. It's never been beneficial for us. When I was in office for the 1 year, I don't know why they did 11 years prior, but my 1 year in there, I worked with other counties such as Santa Cruz County, a very small county. $1.4 million is a lot to that county, and I gave them most of our money. The rest we used for equipment for our helicopters or things of that nature. So no, I don't see the issue at all of going back and fighting for it. It's been 5 times. The community said no.
Thank you very much. It does look like the Stone Garden funds go primarily to overtime now. We are wondering what impact that has on the deputies when they're working a lot of overtime. Does it in any way put the rest of the county at risk if they're doing Stone Garden activities? Mr. Nanos, you get to answer this question first.
Overtime is always a risk for deputies and corrections as well. When your staffing levels are so low, it becomes critical that you've got to get rest for these guys. We have a corrections facility that currently works 13-hour days, and they're getting paid for 12 because they got to stay up there for an hour or go away for an hour for lunch. You think of that, 13-hour days, and then you go home, say your drive to home is 30 minutes there and 30 minutes to work. That's 14 hours. You sleep 8 hours. That's 22 hours. You have 2 hours of your day to socialize with your family, do your running around, take care of your kids, do things. You are putting them at great risk. That shouldn't be occurring. Our staffing levels need to be increased. That's how you impact overtime. To allow them to work for another agency. Trust me, Border Patrol is a great agency, will assist any law enforcement agency, but that's it, a system, not do their job for them. And to do that, make them work Border Patrol for overtime is not the right way to do business.
Thank you. Sheriff Napier, what about the overtime issue and its effect on your employees?
Well, thank you. I think that I'm not sure how the 12-hour shifts and corrections have anything to do with Operation Stone Garden overtime. Further, you cannot give away Stone Garden grant funding because you have no authority to do that. It's not your money to give away. So we never gave Operation Stone Garden money away to anybody else because we couldn't. It's not our money. We were conscious of the fact that deputies working overtime put additional stress on them. And so that's why we limited the number of hours that they could work on Stone Garden deployments. That was done under the prior sheriffs who readily accepted these funds for this because they realized there was a public safety nexus to this. It's not something that Mark Napier created. It was something that was well adopted well before I became sheriff, on operation for more than a decade. The 12-hour shifts are actually embraced by our corrections staff. I only bring that up because my opponent did, which is non-responsive to the question. But we absolutely metered the overtime and maintained a readiness for our staff and ensured that they were not working so many hours that would be debilitating to their ability to perform their primary duties. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We have a question from the audience, and it falls in line with the questions regarding the current attitude in the nation about police. What do you think about the call to reform police departments brought on what appears to be excessive aggression and brutality by some officers? Is this toxic masculinity prevalent in the sheriff's department? And if so, how it can be fixed? And the other part of this that comes through is how do you deter deputies and command staff from the attitudes of the thin blue line and the wall of silence, which seems to have exasperated the situation? Sheriff Napier, we'll let you start first.
Well, thank you. That is a really good question and certainly a timely one. We're on the cutting edge of this. We've implemented our ACT reform plan, which ACT is a neat acronym that stands for accountability, community engagement, transparency. So we're ahead of the curve on this. We also recently completely revised our use of force policy to bring it more in line with national desires and brought it up to more of a contemporary nature. That policy has not been reviewed for more than a decade. So we are on the cutting edge of these things. We're providing better training as part of our AOT program that looks at de-escalation. We're monitoring our employees. We have a new way of monitoring and complaints to ensure that we don't have officers that are having excessive complaint histories or use of force incidents. Our ACT reform plan is actually getting national attention as being on the cutting edge of this, and our efforts are in accord with those recently published by the Department of Justice as guidance to local law enforcement on how to address use of force issues and law enforcement reform. I've testified before the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice on these very issues. So we're well tuned in to the nation's desire for reform in law enforcement to get away from this antiquated and toxic idea of the thin blue line. But let me close by saying I have the greatest confidence in the people that work for the Sheriff's Department. They're good people and I'm absolutely confident in them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Candidate Nanos, you're next to answer the question about the call for police reform. Please unmute.
Could you repeat the question for me, please?
It was a long one. It would let me get to it. Part of it was, how do you deter deputies and command staff from attitudes of the thin blue line and the blue wall of silence? And oops, where's the rest of it? Okay. And what do you think about the call for reform in police departments brought on by what appears to be excessive aggression and brutality by some officers? Is this toxic masculinity prevalent in the Sheriff's Department? And if so, how do you fix it? It's a big one.
Okay. First of all, yes, reform is needed. It's been needed for several years. When I was there, I actually implemented some programs that did deal with reform. Programs like, for example, using electronic monitors for those people in our jails that sit there waiting for trial because they can't afford a bail. A bail should not be your release or your freedom should not be depending on the size of your wallet. And that's what happens. If I commit a homicide or you commit a homicide, we're going to be out tomorrow. But somebody, young kid, commits shoplifting and gets in jail, he could sit there for months. That's not fair. Reform's been needed for a long time. I instilled a lot of reform projects. My opponent eliminated them. You'll have to ask him why. As far as the male part of this, yes, we're the nation, every law enforcement agency is male dominant. The problem though is diversification, and we can do a better job in recruiting. We can do a better job in training. When you look at training, you have to not just look at what you're training and how you're training, but who's doing your training. When your SWAT team, which is very needed, they're the tip of the spear, but they're needed less than 1% of the time. But when your training staff is made up of 99% SWAT officers, what are the results you're going to get? That's what's currently happening over there.
Thank you. Since you opened the topic, I have a question here that says, in looking at crime victims by gender in Arizona, it looks like it's pretty even, about 47.6% female and 51.6% male. Is there equity in the department staffing to assist these different victims? And I will start with you, Sheriff Oops. Yeah, sure. Mr. Nanos, I'll start with you next. Unmute, there we go.
Thank you. Under my opponent's administration, our department is losing its diversification. I promoted the department's first Hispanic chief and the first female corrections officer as a chief in the history of the organization. He demoted the Hispanic chief and eliminated the female correction chief's position within his first month of being in office, basically terminating her. In fact, the only people he's demoted or terminated are women and people of color. He told the first female corrections chief she wasn't qualified, even though she spent 30 plus years in that jail and has a master's in correctional sciences. He eliminated our EEO representative who had a bachelor's degree in law and human resources. He eliminated our auditor, another female employee. Both females were told they weren't needed and they weren't qualified. Both of them had bachelor degrees in their areas of expertise. He also had two female deputies study hard, work hard, get to the top of the list on the sergeant's exam, and they were skipped over and by promoting a white male sergeant who had been demoted 3 months prior. His current team that he handpicked himself, 14 people, all white men. He's handled 70 promotions since he's been there in the commission side of the house. And of those 70, 2 female, 2 people of color. When I was there, we had a report monthly to the command staff that showed us the diversity of our community and the diversity of our department, and we paid attention to those things. Those things went away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff Napier, what do you have to say?
Well, I'll answer the question. My opponent's attack is patently false, and I believe that he knows that, but I'm not going to go down that road. I'll answer the question instead. We have done a significant analysis of the department. We have a planning and research unit now that provides me this information, so I don't have to go on hearsay or anecdotal evidence or any of those things. Our department fairly represents the dynamics and the demographics of our community, and that's simply a fact. We promote the best and brightest, and that's what we should do. We expect that from our department. Our planning and research function certainly helps us do that. Does every law enforcement agency in this nation probably would benefit from increased diversity? Absolutely. We as a law enforcement community are too white and too male. There's no way around that. We have to do a better job of recruiting people of color. And partially, we're going down into the high schools, especially inner city high schools, as a partnership with our JTED program to try to recruit kids of color and inner city kids into law enforcement by providing them a life path into corrections and then into the jail and then into a deputy position. So it is patently false that we have become less diverse under my administration. That is simply not true. And we do fairly and accurately represent the demographics of this community. Any insertion to the contrary is simply false. Thank you.
Thank you. And as long as we're on personnel, I suppose this is the time that you're both dreading. We're going to ask you about body cameras. Are they necessary? And how can we afford them to make sure that everyone has accountability? I'll start with you, Sheriff Napier.
Thank you. As I've said repeatedly, body cameras are inevitable. They're coming. They eventually will be tied to federal grants as a requirement to obtain federal grants or to get preference toward federal grants. I'm not opposed to body cameras. I think the technology behind body cameras is continuing to improve. The fact of the matter is we do not have an appropriation for body cameras. And it's not just about my department. It will require additional personnel to maintain a body camera program, not only in our department, but also at the county attorney's office. So it's a broader issue that the county board of supervisors will have to provide additional appropriation, not only for us, but also for the board of the county attorney's office to maintain that. Assuming that we put body cameras into our correctional facility, we could end up buying around 500 to 800 or more body cameras. That is a significant program to administer. The cost of the physical cameras are a small fraction of the cost of the program. You have to, once you get the program, you have to have the funding to sustain it. And that's personnel resources that we currently do not have. I do not want to be in a position of laying off deputies or corrections officers in order to fund a body camera program. It's simply not baked into our budget in this fiscal year. That being said, I think they're inevitable. They will be as much as a ballpoint pen in the future. We know we have ballpoint pens in our pocket, and pretty soon body cameras will be just like that. Every agency will have them, and it'll become a commonplace piece of police equipment. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Candidate Nanos, your response to body cameras? Up, unmute.
So sorry. You know, my opponent thinks that just giving out answers without any data, no stats, no numbers is more than anecdotal. I'm not sure I follow that. The numbers and stats I give you are his numbers and stats. They're not mine. I don't make them up. They're coming from his office. He says there's no funding for body cameras, but he didn't seem to have any problems eliminating deputy positions in the middle of a staffing crisis so he could give his command staff 30% pay raises. He didn't seem to have a problem in finding some media mogul out there to do video for his campaign and the department at $100,000. The money is there. One thing that's amazing to me is this has gone on now for a week. I will day one have body cameras. He can't say that the money's not there. It is there. You just have to find it and prioritize it. Body cameras are not just inevitable. They should be there. The deputies want them. It keeps them safe. It keeps the community safe. 4 years ago, I was against body cameras because I just couldn't imagine trying to use a camera to say my deputies are going to force them to do good. If I can't get them to do the right thing and I happen to have a camera, there's worse problems. The issue is simply this. Mark refuses to even research it. Just Google body cameras. Spokane, 270 body cameras, $300,000 a year. That's less than 1% of his budget. He doesn't need 800 body cameras. Again, research it. PERF, the Police Executive Review Research Forum. They share with you the policies of other agencies and how they make it work. It's just a matter of doing the job. Get off your duff and do the job. Quit worrying about what's going on in Washington. Quit getting on planes and building your frequent flyer miles. Do the job.
Thank you. And we'll do one more question regarding personnel, and then we'll go on to gentler questions for you guys. Both of you have mentioned endorsements from within the department. It appears candidate Nanos has the endorsement of rank and file personnel, while Sheriff Napier has endorsement of senior management. How do you plan to reconcile these employee groups and ensure good morale when you become sheriff? We will start with, Candidate Nanos, you will go first. Let's unmute your camera. Unmute your microphone.
Yes, ma'am. You know, it's a shame that when I was a young policeman, when I joined the department, I didn't want to do anything with politics. I never wanted to be a politician, and I didn't want to have to deal with politicians. Unfortunately, we have a sheriff who thinks it's appropriate to go out and divide his, doesn't even see the division he creates, going out to his people with his own command team saying, here's a letter of support, sign it. He thinks that that's perfectly appropriate. It creates a level of discomfort for any employee to have their boss come and ask them to do something. What do you think they're going to say? Unfortunately, I've never asked for anybody's endorsement. The only thing I know is when I was home and traveling and enjoying my time off and my retirement with my wife, I was getting called by deputies who were friends of mine. You're a family, 32 years, you build a family. But as the calls kept going, I started getting calls from people who supported Mark. The association that supports me and the rank and file men, they were behind Mark. But 4 years later, they realized he's been a fraud. They got nothing. They wanted, he gave them 26 written promises to get their endorsement, and he fulfilled none. He didn't even try to fulfill one. That's the shame, and that's something Mark has to deal with. He'll tell you how he's got everybody's endorsements, but I'd question how he did that. The only endorsement I want is you, the voters.
Thank you. Sheriff Napier.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure why my opponent's so angry, but I'll answer your question. That's a better tack. You asked me about endorsements. I recently received the endorsement of all corrections associations. So the idea that the rank and file do not support or endorse me, again, is a patently false assertion. It simply is. I've got the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. While the smaller of our deputies association, They also endorse me at the state level at the FOP. And that's not an inconsequential group of employees. On their own volition, 35 of my commanders and 63 of my sergeants signed a letter of support for me. If you believe in something, you put your name to it. That's how you know that you believe in it. Much like our Declaration of Independence, it had been an anonymous document, it would have had little value whatsoever. I'm very proud of these endorsements. People who've known me at the Tucson Police Department for more than 30 years, the Tucson Police Officers Association has also endorsed me. I've got the endorsement of Barbara Lawal, a Democrat county attorney, and also all the Southern Arizona sheriffs, along with members of the Pima County Attorney's Office. I'm proud of these endorsements. I'm not angry about anything, and they've not been coerced. Assertions to that are honestly hurtful and just dishonest. And we shouldn't be going down that path continually in this forum of these continual attacks and non-responsiveness to questions. I don't think that benefits the voters or this process. So I'll continue to answer your questions in a forthright manner. Thank you.
Thank you. That leads to a question I've always had, is you cover a terrifically large area and have to interact with a lot of different groups and people. And I'm wondering how it came to be that the sheriff ran with a political party. It seems to me like that doesn't benefit either one of you when you have to interact with a very diverse community. Do you have an opinion about the having you guys run with a political party instead of just running as, you know, experienced officers who can take on the job? I'll start with you, candidate Napier.
Well, thank you. I agree that this should not be a partisan office. There is no partisanship in public safety. Public safety is not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue, a progressive issue or a conservative issue. It's a community issue. It's a quality of life issue that should transcend political ideology and partisanship. When those things intermingle with public safety, we're going down the wrong road. Now, of course, the idea that the sheriff's office as an elected office is a partisan office is not a decision that Chris or I made. It is, in fact, made by other folks. But we need to divest ourselves from political ideology. And I think when we get down that path, we're on the wrong road. I'm proud to have interacted with Senator Sinema's office recently on some police reform issues. I have a national exposure with major county sheriffs, which is a bipartisan organization at a national level representing the largest sheriffs in the United States. So I don't think there's any role for partisanship in public safety. The community expects better of us. And in my opinion, this should not be a partisan office, much like the county attorney's office. And really, if you look at the row offices, elected officials in Pima County, explain to me how they're really partisan offices. They're really not. The public expects better than that and not a lot of partisanship. Thank you. That's a good question.
Candidate Nanos, you're next.
Well, Dee, you hit it. I don't know how you did that. You found something Mark and I agree on. Wow, amazing. Yes, the sheriff shouldn't, putting letters by names for sheriffs should, I saw Green Valley, Oro Valley, they don't put any letters by their names. I think that might be something the entire nation should be looking at. But yes, the sheriff is a nonpartisan position. But since I answered the question, I want to take the rest of my time to go back to the endorsement issue. And that's simply this. When you have the endorsement of another agency and not your own, that says something. Why am I so angry? I'm angry because I care. I care what this man has done to our department and what he's doing to our community. He has taken this department, thousands of badges before me and thousands after me, wore this badge with honor. That badge means something. It stands for honor, loyalty, have some integrity. You never lie. And this man has lied. And that is a problem for me. He's tarnished the badge that I wore proudly, and others have too for 40 years. That's all.
Okay. Now we're going to ask you some public health questions. It looks like. I know public health isn't necessarily yours, but one of the questions is, we have had record hot summer, and deputies respond to so many outdoor activities like traffic accidents. What does the sheriff department need to protect itself and the public from the heat when you're involved in these instances? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Nanos.
Oh, did I unmute? Yes. We need a lot of water. Deputies are no different than any human being out there. And we say it all the time. I know Mark does too. We put out public safety announcements. You're going to go hiking. You're going to be doing anything outdoors. You need to stay hydrated, have some shade, have some sunscreen, wear a hat, all the things we've all known growing up in Tucson. If you've lived here for any amount of time, you know those things. Our deputies know that. They're well cared for in that regard with their equipment they have. I think there's some of the best equipment across the country.
That's good to know. Candidate Napier?
I would echo Chris's comments on that. I think our deputies do a good job. They're acclimated to this climate, and they do a good job taking care of themselves, and we do equip them very well, much better than the department that I came from. I think the Pima County Sheriff's Department does an excellent job of equipping our people. But not to go on an attack or anything or to be angry, but I'd like to take this a little bit of a different direction in migrants. We don't talk nearly enough about the deaths in the desert, and our environment is very harsh, and we recover between 50 and 100 bodies a year in the deserts of Pima County. And this is a human rights tragedy. You know, we do have water stations out there by No More Deaths. I do support that. But when we talk about the environment and the stress and the strain and the dangers of our environment, I think it would be irresponsible not to talk about the plight of migrants coming up from the desert. And the fact that too many of them are losing their lives out there. And that is a human rights tragedy. But overall, I think we do a great job of awareness with skin cancer is a major thing for deputies because they're out in the sun and they can't always lather up with those products necessary to protect themselves from sun exposure. But overall, our deputies do a good job, and we do a good job of equipping them. Thank you for the question.
Oh, glad to know that. I worry about you guys. Let's see. Trying to keep up with the questions. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. I got body cameras, got gender. Okay, what do you see as the biggest single crime, or where do you focus a lot of the personnel time, particularly the deputies? What is the biggest area of concern? And I will begin with you, Candidate Napier.
Well, I think the obvious one is violent crime, because that certainly makes the news. But there are a lot of crimes that kind of fall under the radar screen. You know, domestic violence is significantly underreported. Child crimes. We're becoming much more aware of sex trafficking, and our proximity to the border with respect to human trafficking and sex trafficking does make us vulnerable to that. So we do focus a lot of our efforts on violent crime because that is very impactful to our community. But I'll tell you something that's really on my radar screen lately, because we've seen a significant uptick in it, and I think everybody driving across the Tucson area and in the county would echo this concern. Our people are driving crazy. They really are. They're just, it's nuts. And we're having too many fatal and personal injury traffic accidents as a result of the busyness of our employees doing other things. And I would like us to focus a little bit more effort on red light running and traffic enforcement, because somebody who's hit by a drunk driver or somebody driving through an intersection against the red light at 60 miles an hour is much like a homicide victim. That was somebody just commuting to work. So we do need to pay more attention to traffic offenses, but I think always law enforcement's primary focus will be on violent crime. And I'm very proud to say that we are commensurate and in accord with national trends in reducing crime, and crime is much lower in Pima County over the last 3 years, and that's borne out by FBI statistics and also our internal documentation. Thank you.
Well, and I looked up crime statistics, and your department seems to be doing an excellent job of solving homicides. That isn't something I had expected to see. Mr. Nanos, what do you think the department's biggest concern is, and what do you need to have help?
Well, clearly, when we talk about crimes, there's just violent crime is horrific. I mean, I worked homicide, I worked sex crimes, I worked child abuse. To see those victims, and that is really tough. But the real purpose for law enforcement, the number one job we do, is you call 911 and we respond. That's really what the deputies do. And when you have an emergency, something that's life or death, every second counts. So that time it takes for that deputy to get to your location is critical. Today, when I was there, our response times were some of the best in the state, if not the country. We averaged 3.56 minutes, 3 minutes, 56 seconds to get to a priority one call, the most dangerous call there is. Today, again, the sheriff's numbers, 7, 8, 9, up to 10 minutes on some of these priority calls. And it's all because, why? Staffing. If you don't have the men and women in the field to do their job, then those calls get neglected and it takes us longer to get there. So the priority should be how do we respond to our calls and respond safely and still get there in time.
Thank you. I noticed that 911 was down for a while. Does the Sheriff's Department need updated equipment for 911, or was it just a fluke? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Nanos.
Well, as far as it being down and the reasons, I'll leave that to Mark because I don't have access to that information. What I would tell you though is that our 911 center is one of the state of the arts. It's probably, I'm going to guess, less than 10 years old. I'd encourage anybody to go down and take a tour of the facility. It is spectacular, and they've done a great job there. Our dispatchers do a great job. They're very well trained. They're good people, good hearts. So yeah, as far as it going down from time to time, I'm sure it happens. Just like you lose your phone connections, they can do theirs, but I'll let Mark answer that.
Sheriff Napier, how is our 911 system?
Thank you, Chris, for deferring that, because we do have some information on that. It was not just a Pima County problem, it was a regional problem, and it expanded even out to some portions of the Southwest United States. Very, very concerning. I'm on the executive committee of the Arizona Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I have a secret security clearance issued by the United States government. So I can essentially hear the things that might scare all of you. There was some concern that there might be something else at play here other than just a technology glitch. So the honest answer is we don't know, but it's exceptionally concerning that we had a broader system failure. So it wasn't isolated to the Pima County Sheriff's Department. It affected many communities in the Southwest United States, and we really don't know why. So it's still under investigation, but I'd like the public to know that when 911 goes down, we have contingency plans, because as Chris points out, we have fantastic people in our communications center. We recently promoted a Hispanic female to a leadership role in our communications center, and she's doing an excellent job, and we put a captain down there to oversee that facility as well. So we're able, please, if the public is concerned, and they should rightly be so, that 911 went down and that means that you can't get service. That's not true. We have contingency plans to operate without 911, without significant degradation to public safety in the county. But that's an excellent question, because I'm sure a lot of people were concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you both. Well, we're done torturing you with questions, and really want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and opinions and letting us know a lot more about how this department works. And now we're going to go on to your closing statements. We'll begin with you, Candidate Napier. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you. I'd like to again thank the League for allowing my opponent and I to participate in this process. It means a lot to inform the voters. I believe that we need to keep our Sheriff's Department moving in the right direction. Change and holding people accountable is never going to be entirely popular, and we shouldn't expect it to be. I am the elected Vice President of Arizona Sheriff's Association and also the Major County Sheriffs of America. my peers have recognized me as a leading sheriff in the United States in a matter of just 4 years. So I think that we're doing a lot that's right. Again, I'm endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, which is a body in the Sheriff's Department, both corrections associations, the majority of commanders and the majority of supervisors of the Sheriff's Department, along with Barbara Lawal, our time-serving Democrat County Attorney, and all Arizona sheriffs. I would be so pleased, so honored, and humbled for everyone's vote for re-election for another 4-year term. I believe that we're moving forward in the right direction at the Sheriff's Department. We've got so much to be proud of, and I'm so very proud of all the people that work there. And I would appreciate your support. And thank you again for allowing us to participate.
Thank you. And candidate Nanos, you have 1 minute. Unmute.
Thank you. In today's world of policing, we've been given a great opportunity to make some real change and real reform, and it shouldn't be an opportunity that's wasted. Earlier this month, my opponent was interviewed on the Bill Buckmaster show and asked about systemic racism across our nation's police departments, and he said he'd not seen any evidence of systemic racism. That's, to me, is like telling us that Rosa Parks was all about poor bus service. Real reform starts right here at the top, but right here. If you're a leader and you cannot have any introspect and look at your own racial biases, how can we ever expect to lead others? My reform will look at alternatives for overcrowded jails and the high cost of incarceration. It will be out of compassion and need and what is best for our community. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I will always be here for you, not in Washington, and I will always listen to your concerns. We are a great community, and together we can do anything. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for letting Mark and I share our thoughts.
Thank you all for joining the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson for this forum. A recording of this forum can be viewed on our Facebook page at League of Women Voters Greater Tucson, as well as our YouTube channels. Now, please be sure to vote. You will find links to how to vote on our website, LWV for League of Women Voters, Tucson.com. This is Dee Maitland for the League of Women Voters. Goodbye and thank you.